What's up, everybody? My name is Kaya Gasson, and welcome to today's episode of Nerd Out, a show where I get to sit down with some amazing people and talk about things that they are passionate about. Why? Because I want to. And today I am joined by guys. Where's my guys? It's your turn.
Hi, everybody, and I am Emma Hansen, and today we decided to put Miss Kaya Gaston in the hot seat because the Void Queen has questions.
Okay.
So, welcome to Nerd Out. What are we nerding out about today?
Oh, thanks for having me. I've never been on Nerd Out before. It's really nice to be here.
Welcome. Yeah, really great setup. Love this show.
Well, I guess today we're going to be nerding out about something near and dear to my heart, and that is Star Wars.
So, I don't know that much about Star Wars except Carrie Fisher.
That, honestly, if that is all you know about Star Wars, then that's all you need to know about Star Wars.
Is that all you would want me to know about Star Wars?
It's not.
So what should I know about Star Wars?
I would tell you that Star Wars is in a perfect world with a wonderful story that makes us believe that we all can rise and fall. I love Star Wars. I grew up with Star Wars. There's been a thing kind of going around the internet that is 30 Days of Star Wars. And one of the first questions they asked is, what is your first memory of Star Wars? And this kind of created a really interesting conversation with my mom, where I tried to pick apart this memory that I had and found out it was a memory of when I was 2 years old, sitting in my neighbor's apartment while she was watching me for a little bit, watching Return of the Jedi. And the reason I remember this is because of the Ewoks and watching them bounce around, and how crazy that is to be so like into a world at 2 that you remember that from 2. Like, you're still wearing diapers, and yet I remember my first interaction with it.
That's so much better than my first TV memory, which is Ren and Stimpy. So,
I mean, that's valid though.
I guess.
Hey, it's whatever story we want to align ourselves with.
So over the years, there have been a lot of different Star
yeah.
Wars movies. So what has made you continued to sort of embrace the entire franchise? What about it is it that you love?
I think probably one of my favorite. The reason I love Star Wars so much is, I don't want to say it's like the stereotypical good against evil, but it's a good hero story that doesn't just say, hey, the hero's going to defeat the bad guys. It added another layer of saying, hey, the hero is trying to save the bad guy. At least that's what it was in 4, 5, and 6. And following those stories, and maybe even just the memories that I have with my dad in that, because my dad was ultimately the one that kind of introduced me to Star Wars. And when it comes to it, like, okay, so 4, 5, and 6 obviously are the first ones, and you open up and you have Luke Skywalker, and you have it opens up with the rebel plans and Leia, who is amazing, and watching Leia transform from a princess to a general in my lifetime has just been fantastic. But throughout the whole movie, you have these real world battles, even though they're in real world concepts, though they live in space. The concept of good and evil, right and wrong, and the sway that both have. And it wasn't so much that you constantly are right or constantly good or constantly bad. It's about finding the balance, bringing balance to the Force, and what that means. And I hope that it continues to grow into, that means not being just one or the other. It's understanding that both have power, and that the extremes are what get you in trouble. And I think that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me into the fandom. It's constantly finding that balance and seeing how these real world things and these moral kind of qualms affect these characters, and seeing how they grow kind of like makes you think about how you would grow in that.
So when we were talking earlier, you also began sort of talking and unpacking some of the newer Star Wars movies and the importance of those stories and who those stories are for. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Star Wars, obviously, it came out in 1977. That it was a considerable long time ago for a lot of us. Yeah. And so it was for a completely different generation, different time. And those stories spoke to that generation. And then when we hit the 90s, we got 3 more. We got 1, 2, and 3. And how you can definitely see the change in style. As imperfect as those movies are, that style differed and brought in a whole new audience. Now you've gone from the I almost whatever. You have the boomer generation and the Gen X generation, to now you're in the millennial generation. You're drawing in these new kids with new characters that are exciting or funny or simplistic, and getting them into this world, and then suddenly they're like, oh man, 1, 2, and 3? You're telling me that there's a 4, 5, and 6? And so now you've led them back to these that opened in the 70s. Well, now we're in 7, 8, 9. And we're bringing in a whole nother generation. A generation that is doing its very best to push even more forward in how we view gender, how we view race, and how we view power. And now we have brand new characters. We have a female-led Star Wars, and one that is trying to address those issues of why do we have to be we can't be all good or all bad. We have to acknowledge that they both exist. We can't just completely shun those parts of ourselves. And when we do so, we tend to go crazy. And then we finally have John Boyega. We have a Black character in Star Wars that's not, James Earl Jones's voice through Vader. And what? Oh, and Oscar Isaacs, like, he is an amazing actor, and you still have those characters that are calling to the older generations. You still have C-3PO. You still have R2-D2. You still had Han Solo. Sorry, spoilers. You still have, General Leia. It's just now she's General Leia and not Princess Leia, and she's running this thing. And this is how empowering that is to this generation to look up on the screen and see themselves. And that's one of the things that I loved in Rogue One. One of the stories that I remember, Rogue One takes place between 4, 5, and 6, and takes place between 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6. So it's how the rebels got the plans and the whole story with that. And everybody thought it was going to be a flop, but it is by far one of the best Star Wars movies ever made. Female driven. It explains a plot hole that Star Wars fans always try to fight against, in the fact that there is a 2-meter wide, stay on target, exhaust port in the Death Star that was this huge flaw. And why was it even there in the first place? That led straight into the reactor that exploded the Death Star. And it takes that concept, that little plot hole, and created this beautiful story of a man who was fighting against the regime that had hired him. And it's about doing what you have to do to save the next people, where he did his part, he played his part as an Empire soldier, as an Empire tech, and created a flaw with their trust so that it could ultimately lead to their demise. And it was that love that he had for his daughter that brought that in. And in that movie, you had Forrest Whitaker, who was amazing. And you had Diego Luna, which was even more important, because now you have a Hispanic man who was able to have his accent, who wasn't told that he needed to abide by a certain, like, okay, we're going to hire you, but you can't, you have to have a speech coach. And sitting down with his father and watching a sci-fi movie of him in space without anybody going, well, there's no Hispanics in space. Sitting down with his father and having that moment with him at the premiere and watching Rogue One with him as the lead was just awesome and empowering. And that's what I love about this generation of Star Wars. How we have taken each step, and some people are getting angry. A lot of people are getting angry. A lot of people are saying, hey, these are my movies. Mm-hmm. They're not supposed to be your movies. These are our movies. It's still the same story. It's still the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force, and how we are constantly being manipulated by each, and how we need to find a balance. And it's still talking about our humanity. It's just now there's more people at the table. It's understanding that there are other people in this galaxy. You have aliens, but now you can't show the diversity of human. And to have Rey as my Jedi now is just amazing. To watch her badass on, like, Daisy Ridley worked out so hard for these movies that it was like, you watch her, she is so bomb ass. She went through so much training. She went through so much work that she is my Jedi, and I couldn't be prouder. Couldn't be prouder. I'm excited to see what this next movie is going to be about. And I'm really hoping that they call back to some canon material where Luke was supposed to be a gray Jedi. That he was supposed to be the one that, in bringing balance, meant having an understanding and a respect for both sides. And that's what that means. And I'm hoping that they allow her to do it, because there's so many instances in the other movies where the fact that she had a calling to the dark side, that you're like, you have to shut that part off of yourself. There is a light and a dark in all of us. And a lot of those situations that we've had in our past are the reason that we have them. And we can't ignore them. And when we do ignore them, it's when we have more problems. It is acknowledging their presence and acknowledging that those live within us. It's what makes us stronger. It's what pushes us forward. And I think that really is spelled out nicely in those movies.
Yeah, I think it's always really important to acknowledge the duality and the dichotomy of light and dark, or light and shadow, really. And I mean, I think that that's a trope that exists across genres that I think is being explored more often, but it seems like Star Wars is the one franchise that is the core piece of the entire franchise. That's it, of understanding and acknowledging that both of those sides exist.
Yeah.
So representation is always really important. We're working on it within the film industry. Obviously, a long way to go. So that brings me to, is it The Mandalorian?
The Mandalorian?
Okay. So I've heard a lot of different reports on that. I know that you're up to date with it. Mm-hmm. So I want to know what you think about it, because I have heard some interesting reports in terms of representation in The Mandalorian, because Star Wars people said it was doing so well, and then this was released, and I knew that there were a lot of disappointed people.
I don't know, because I know that I don't know if I have enough information on it to really have an opinion. I can say that personally I'm enjoying it. I'm really excited that Pedro Pascal is the Mandalorian. I've really been enjoying the representation of having diverse tribes in it. And I really like the fact that there are strong, very, very, very strong females in this show, and that unapologetically. One of the things that I really don't like that is a trope in movies is that here's a strong female and here's why they're strong. I don't need that. Just there's a strong female that's able to carry it. There's no reason to justify it. There's no reason to validate it. It's just they are also capable. And I feel like they've been doing that well in The Mandalorian. I also think that it's cinematically beautiful the way it's been shot. As for its representation, I'm seeing more people. I am seeing more people than just white people. And I am excited for that, and I want to continue to see that grow. But I don't know culturally, from a cultural standpoint, how it could be disappointing or not, just because I don't have the knowledge on it. But I personally am enjoying it, and I think it's a story that I'm excited to see where it's going to go.
Why are you so excited about it?
Oh man, because it takes place after the fall of the Empire. Because everybody always wonders what happens, because we've gone from the fall of the Empire in 4, 5, and 6 to 7, 8, and 9 to the right to now we have the Republic, and so no, New Republic. We have the New Republic, and you don't know what happened in that time. You know that there are places all over the place that are remnants of the previous war, but what happened? What happened? And so I feel like the Mandalorian is really starting to explore that, and I'm excited to see what kind of nuggets are going to come out of it.
And so, of the franchise, which I'm curious to know which one is your favorite, but and also which one had the most impact on you?
I feel like it's kind of difficult because 4, 5, and 6 are always going to have a real New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi are always going to have a very sweet spot in my heart, because those are the movies I sat down and watched with my dad, and having those moments with him and getting 4, 5, and 6 on VHS when I was 8 and finding them already opened in my parents' room because my dad was watching them because he couldn't wait until my birthday to watch them, and going to the theaters and seeing 1, 2, and 3 with my dad was a little surreal, where it's like, okay, these came out in 77. I obviously was not here, or I look really good. I obviously wasn't here. And so being able to experience the franchise since then with my dad has been real great. I will have to say that The Force Awakens is the most important to me, because now I was able to see a female Jedi. And that was really cool, because we all want to feel like we belong in the world, and it's, we can find that we can associate with a character, but when we see a character that's us, it just makes it even more endearing. But favorite Star Wars movie overall will always be Rogue One. That movie just was perfection in every manner. The story was perfection, the way they ended it was perfection, and the fact that it went from Rogue One to you could take a movie that was literally made like a couple of years ago and then go back and watch the movie that came out in 1977 seamlessly. Like how did you do that? How did you have that much understanding of that story? It's just crazy. And so that, it will always be my favorite, and it was always the most heartbreaking. But like maybe the ones that probably are not as popular, like 1, 2, and 3, those are super, super controversial. They are not great. But, and I thought a lot about this, okay, the elements of Star Wars are still very prevalent in it. In the originals, in 4, 5, and 6, you see Luke being mentored from Obi-Wan Kenobi and being pulled and taught by Yoda. And Yoda always said that in Star Wars, in the world, that fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And that is what pulls you to the dark side. And so when you take those things and you go back and you watch 1, 2, and 3, what are the things that you see? You see a young Anakin pulled from his environment and placed before a council and never validated that his fear was okay, and told that you can't be trained here because you're afraid, and told again, fear leads to hate. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Then you go into 2, and he's afraid that his mom's going to die. And he keeps having these visions, and he wants to go and check on them, but they're told that you have to completely cut off your family. Okay? Fear leads to anger. Now we're angry. And then we go to the 3rd movie, we're at the end of the 2nd and 3rd movie, and that anger led to hate. And that hate caused so much damage. And in the end, he severs his relationship with his wife. He severs his relationship with his master, who is like his brother. And in that battle, he loses literally parts of himself and his humanity. And so now that hate has left the suffering. So those movies aren't perfect, but those teachings were very much still embodied in them. And woo, way to go. We're still very much embodied in them. And as cringeworthy as they were, the soul of Star Wars still lived in them. And so I still really appreciate them. And if you put Liam Neeson in anything, I'm going to love it. Is really what it comes down to. And even in the first one, in The Phantom Menace, which is the only one that's the best out of all of those, you have the most epic fight scene ever that is cut to one of the strongest scores. And that is the fight between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Darth Maul, where suddenly these doors open and there's Darth Maul with a double-edged saber, and you hear ba, 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 and they're like going at it, and it's so crazy, and that music hypes you even more. And it really, I think, showcased the power that a Jedi can exert in a battle. There are force jumps and pushes, and the acting itself, Ray Park's fighting was just amazing, and it showed the different teachings of pacing Darth Maul, that is pacing back and forth between this force barrier that closed, waiting for it to open again, and his impatience and his anger and the hatred that drives him. And then you see on the other side of this force barrier, Qui-Gon Jinn kneeling, trying to remember his teaching, trying to calm himself, trying to connect himself back to the Force, and just patiently waiting. And then you see Obi-Wan Kenobi, still a student, using both of those. Still kind of trying to calm himself like his master, but feeling the pull and the energy of Darth Maul. And in the end, it was Obi-Wan that won. And I feel in that moment, you really start to understand that it's not so much about one or the other. It's about the balance. It's about the balance. And that's all Force is. It's about finding your balance. It's all Star Wars. It's finding your balance. It's finding where you belong. It's understanding that you can't cut parts away from yourself and be expected to be the strongest person.
I've never felt so compelled to watch an entire franchise than I am right now in this moment.
It's amazing, and it's quite a trip. And I think just the fact that I can look at a Star Wars movie and think about my dad, and think about who's still living. I know I keep talking as if like my dad has passed. My dad is still very much living. I just love my dad. And, where I can look at that and be like, my dad introduced me to this world because it was important to him. And I can't wait to introduce my kids or my nieces to that world because it's important to me. Because in the end, these stories are important to us. And every story, like humans, are imperfect. But it's all about finding where you belong in it. And I always feel like I belong in Star Wars. And I still very much hope I wake up tomorrow and the Force exists and I can be a Jedi. Oh. I want to be a Jedi. Let me be a Jedi.
So we're winding down.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you want to share, or anything you wished I had asked you?
Ooh. I think I think what I would love to wrap up with is the fact that with a world that is always changing and always growing and always learning, that the gatekeeping has to stop. I am a fan. I was not alive in 1977. Just because you were, and you were sitting in that theater, and you were lucky to be sitting in that theater and see it when it was originally released in a world where NDAs didn't exist, and Mark Hamill was sending the scripts to his buddies to like, check this out, doesn't make you more of a fan than I am. These stories are going to evolve like people evolving. The thing is to not be afraid of that change. Is to embrace why those changes were made and still love that story. So in the end, just let people be fans of things and foster more people to love them instead of shutting them down with your insecurity that you have created in yourself. So let people love things.
You heard it here first, folks. Gatekeeping is garbage. So I think that's it. I think we did it.
I think we did too.
I think we did it. I don't know how to close out.
I'll close out. Don't worry. Thank you guys so much. This is so much worse than I thought it was going to be. This really is terrifying. I now have a lot more empathy for the people who come on the show. But thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. Daisy Ridley, I love you. I'm very sorry I said Ripley. I just really wanted you to be in Aliens. Tune in next week. I love you all. Mwah!